Hey, so in this video I'm going to give you an overview of Microthemer's styling options. There are over 150 different properties, but most of them come in the form of either a drop-down menu or a plain text field. There's just a handful that have slightly different patterns, and we'll cover those. But let's start by just explaining what the properties have in common. So, a drop-down menu is used, for example, when there's just a few a limited set of options that you're likely to want to choose from. And so it's just convenient to have a menu for setting something. And the input fields are there for when you're more likely to, say, enter a custom value like 36 pixels or 2 rem. Microthemer also offers suggestions for these fields too. And these suggestions are a combination of some presets and also just the things that you enter. You can clear the presets if you prefer, and then it'll just remember some existing styles that you've input. I put these in before recording the video. There is also an option down below where you can use sampled values. So by expanding this, you can resample at any time. But what this shows is the values for the font size property that have been used throughout the theme or any other plugins that are loading their resources on the page. And that just helps you keep things consistent with what's already in place. And the same is true for the site variables. So if we expand this option here, we can see that there's, say, a setting, a variable that's been defined called font size, H1 font size, so that'd be like the font size for heading ones. So that's really great if you're setting your variables, say, using another application, or you just want to tap into some variables that your theme might already be providing. So if we just open up this suggestions menu again, you can see that at the top there's also a tape measure slider for fine-tuning your values. So it's nice to see on screen. If you're not quite sure exactly what setting you want to do, you can slowly adjust with this. There's also some buttons for just slightly tweaking up and down, and you can choose your preferred unit here as well. On the subject of tweaking values, there's a few other ways of doing it. So if we close this, if we hold down the Alt key and then use our mouse wheel, we can adjust the value just like we're using the slider only, but we don't even have to click on the field. We can just slide it up and down. Holding down the Alt key just prevents the options from scrolling up and down, which is the default behavior with the mouse wheel normally. Also, you can, if we've clicked onto the field, we can use keyboard arrows to just move up and down. Just bear in mind that will have a slightly different effect if the menu's showing. The keyboard arrows switch between different settings in the menu, different options. And the same is true, by the way, for the drop-down menus. You can just hover over the field and then use the mouse wheel, if you're holding down the Alt key, the mouse wheel, to just switch between the different options. So that can be really handy. And something else I forgot to mention actually about the when you're adjusting values of these kinds of fields, so it's a plain input field. If I'm using the mouse wheel again here to switch, but if I'm holding down the Alt key, but if I also hold down Shift, then the increment will be much bigger. So it's kind of it's too much for changing a font size, but sometimes if you're changing like the width or something, or you're dealing with slightly larger scales, it's useful. If you hold Shift, it will work when you're using the keyboard arrows, the mouse wheel, and the little buttons here. And that covers basically everything you can do with the most common styling options where you've got a drop down or just a plain empty field. We can now just look at a handful of the other options which are slightly different. So with the font family, there's an option to choose a Google font as well. And if you click that, you will get this field here. So if you click this Browse Google Fonts button, you will then get a window where you can browse all the fonts and you can search for something. So, I don't know, Open Sans is already here, let's say Roboto. And then you can, so this is nice when you're like still looking for a font, you're not quite sure what you want to use, and you can try out, say, Handwriting Fonts. Whoops, let's get rid of Roboto so something appears. And yeah, you can, to insert it, you just, let's just use this font, and now we've got that font there. And all of the fonts that we use will be remembered, so you can apply them again more conveniently without having to browse here. Another field which is slightly different is the color picker field. So here we've got an option for setting the color, the type of color, using this slider here, and then we can adjust the saturation, the darkness or the lightness by just dragging this around here. And Microthemer will keep a record of the recent colors that we've used for convenience. There is an option actually to save colors as well. So if we know that we want to use a selection of colors and different tones, that's really handy. And to keep things consistent with the existing styling, again, you've got this option here where the site colors are listed, and you can resample this. So we've just set a purple color. So if we resample this, that will now appear in our list of sampled colors. This picks up any colors that are used on the current page. So also we've got an option to set the, if we want to use Rgb Colors Opacity, we can do that using this slider. We can paste in our own custom hex codes or RGB values. And also there's an option for sampling color variables here. So I've created some variables just for the purpose of this video so that some would show up. So I can choose, say, this primary color, blue, and that, again, that's just nice if there are colors that have been defined maybe in the theme in the form of variables, which is more and more common these days. You can just scan for these anytime on any given page. I'll just show you how I set that up actually. So I created a selector which I've called variables, and I went to the code editor. Let's just expand this a little bit so you can see it a bit more easily. And I just entered in some variables. So the ones that are color based were these two that showed up in our color menu here. So root means that they affect the HTML element, which is the outermost element. So they're essentially their global variables. That's what Microthemer picks up. It only picks up variables that have been applied to the HTML or the body tag. Okay, so let's go back to our previous selector here, and we will go to now the background options, because one thing that's different here is with background images, you've just got an option here for navigating. If you had any images in my library, I could use them, or I just drag some across here. Another set of options that's slightly different is the Flexbox, which, just because it has this toggle here where basically, so when you create a Flexbox layout, so I could do that. Maybe if I click on this, let's see, and I want to get container, and then I could set display to flex. And what that does is it just puts everything in columns. What happens is some of the CSS properties are only relevant to the container element, which is what we're on here. And then other flex properties are only relevant to if we were actually selecting an individual element here. And then we would apply one of these. So that's just why you've sometimes got a toggle. So I'm just going to now delete this Flexbox selector, and also delete this one as well. And now let's take a look at CSS Grid. So I'm going to go to the CSS Grid demo page on the live demo for this. So if I hold Control, I can click on this link here, and it'll take me to a new page. And then if let's say I click on the container here, save that selector, and then go to the grid properties, I can adjust the layout of these items using this control here. So here I've created 3 columns. I could have created 4 columns or 2 columns, etc. It's just really easy with this little dragging system here. There's only so much room to show the grid, so there's also an option to expand it here. If you're creating quite a complex grid, you might want to do that. And also there's a grid highlight option. So basically it just shows us visually where the grid lines are, and that can sometimes be quite useful. Right here I've got colored boxes that kind of make it quite clear, but sometimes you're working with text content and it's not quite as clear where the boundaries are. By the way, well, I've got grid highlights showing. I might want to turn off the regular highlighting for the element, which is it's useful when you're first clicking on an element and selecting it and to know where you are, but we don't need it if we've got our grid highlighting on already. So once we've defined our grid, our number of columns, we can also do things like move the items within the grid. So I've moved this first item to fill the full width. I could make the number 7 come down here, and the same with number 6 to make it a nice even grid. And you can move things around as well as resizing them. There's all sorts of things you can do with grid. And if you want to just clear what you've done and start again, you use this option here, and that just clears all of the settings that were created using this control. The other items in this area are kind of they're just like drop-down menus and fields, so we've already covered that. So let's go on to finish. Let's just look at the animation. Here we've got a system where we can choose a stock animation. So I'm going to say, I don't know, slide in is what I was after. Slide in left to move that in. And Microthemer will always animate things if we change any of the settings. So I could make that slightly slower and it will run the animation again. But also we've got an option to just play it at will as well using this button here. Okay, and I think that covers all of the main patterns for styling the options. I haven't talked about what each individual style property really means. That'll be done in other videos. Okay, thanks for watching.